Terrance Niedziela Jr. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you for having me.
How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Right.
So for listeners on why I did the whole Niedziela is because I was getting familiar with Terrance pre-show about his surname and you were giving me the background behind it. So let's start there. Let's repeat what you told me before we come on. What is the heritage behind Niedziela?
All right. So Niedziela is Polish. It's actually Polish for Sunday. And so my father's family, his grandparents came over from Poland a little bit before World War One. And so they kept their last name. I did have one great aunt who changed it to Sunday. So, but all the rest of us have always been Nigella. And so they lived in the Polish quarter of Chicago in the United States.
Okay. So, but you were born in the US.
Yes, yes. I was born in the U.S. in a state called Wisconsin. It's in the upper Midwest of the United States, where it's a lot colder there than it is by you in the wintertime. Uh, so 40, 50, 60 below zero, Fahrenheit, which is, I think, pretty much about the same in Celsius once you get into the sub-zero temperatures. But the only time we would close school if it was so bitterly cold that it was too dangerous for kids to be out, or there was so much snowfall that the snowplows could not clear it away from the roads. And that wasn't very often. So we'd bundle ourselves out and go play in the snow and everything.
Wow. Yeah, once again, this was another pre-show discussion between Terrance and I because here in South Africa, it's our winter months, which is probably like summer for you. But for me, it's cold and I do not like it. Just last week, we had this cold one because there is certain areas in South Africa where it does snow. So what happens is the snow moves upwards to where I am in Johannesburg. So we get hit with this cold front. We don't really get snow in Johannesburg, but when it starts snowing, like in Cape Town in South Africa, or the Drakensberg, which is close to Durban in South Africa, that cold just comes upwards and hits us. So, like this week, it's much more better, but it's still cold, and I do not like it. I do not like wearing two jackets at the same time, you know, but I make do with it. So as I was telling you before pre-show, where you grew up, I will not survive at all.
Just got to wear warmer clothes. That's all. It'll be right.
Yeah, I just feel so uncomfortable. It's like even when I'm sleeping at night, okay, so I will like have a shower, then the body's like all heated up and I'll keep like a short sleeve shirt on. And I do my best to keep that short sleeve shirt on to as late as possible. So if I fall asleep with the shirt on, cool, I'm all good. But then I'll be waking up like about 2 in the morning, shivering. And then I'm looking for a sweater or a jacket to put on so I can go back to sleep. But I guess we're all different. Some people prefer
Mm.
the cold, some people prefer, the heat. But one thing is, and I don't want to come across as somebody who's complaining, because, and I'm sure you get this as well, in the US, when it's summer and it's too hot, people are complaining. When it's winter and it's too cool, too cold, people are complaining. Whereas me, I'm all about gratitude. So I appreciate, the moment that I'm in. I just don't prefer the cold.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much.
Yeah. So, Terrance, once again, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here. Um, and where I always love to start is getting to know the author on a personal, intimate level. So, I am going to take you back. This is going to be a throwback moment for us here. I am going to take you back to fourth grade when you started writing. Tell us the story.
All right. So, I've always had a huge imagination. I was actually taught at home until 3rd grade. I'm the oldest of 6 kids. And so, when homeschooling all of us, became too much, we went to public school. And so that you have to go through testing here to find out, grade and reading level and math ability and all that kind of stuff. Well, I went in with an 8th grade reading level. So almost, well, I guess, secondary school, very advanced. So I would read thick novels in a day like it was nothing. And I just devoured everything that, and I loved fantasy. And so by the time I got to 4th grade, I really started taking the stories that I was making up in my head and writing them down. And so some of them were for class projects. The teacher would say, write a short story. And so we actually had like, it was like a folded printer paper that was stapled. So it was like a booklet. And so you write it in there and then you draw pictures that went with it and everything. And so one of the first ones I ever did was about a man who landed on, he was shipwrecked on this island, and it had all of these giant amethyst, gem crystals everywhere and everything. And he was shrunk down. I can't remember if he was turned into a mouse or not. I think he was. And he had like armor and amethyst bladed sword, and he fought some creature to save the day or whatever. Cause I loved knights and chivalry and all that kind of stuff. Um, but, uh, that was kind of the first steps into becoming an author. I started writing a book as well, and I shared it with one of my family members, an older family member, and they gave me very harsh criticism. And so I tore it up and I threw it away, and I said, I'm never going to let them read anything that I had ever written again. Um, but skip forward a few years. My parents divorced when I was in 5th grade, dealing with very rough home life, um, abuses and different things like that, school with my peers, bullying and lots of things. And so it was so bad that I started creating worlds to like submerge myself in, to withdraw and protect myself. But I was also reaching the point of really being hopeless, contemplating suicide, a lot of things like that. And I was ready to give up on writing. I was ready to give up on a lot of things. But my 7th grade English teacher, Miss Sapitis, I'll never forget her because she pulled me aside one day and she encouraged me in my writing. And it was the little positive boost that I needed to continue. If it had not been for Miss Sapitis, I don't know if I would be where I'm at now. um, in a lot of different ways. And what's funny is years later, after I was done, graduated from high school and everything else like that, and was working full time, uh, I ran into her at a grocery store that I was working in. And I thanked her, and she kind of gave me this weird look, and she's like, I was just doing my job. So for her, she was just doing the job of a teacher. But for me, it was a lifeline that I needed. And so in through high school, I actually really dove into writing novels. Um, and then I started a trilogy, a fantasy trilogy. I finished the first book of that trilogy shortly after I got out of high school, wrote the second book in the trilogy, um, wrote a little bit of the third and set it aside because I had all these other ideas. Like I have a really hyper imagination. I mean, I literally have over 50 folders in my computer that are filled with books, story ideas, whatever. And so it's just all sorts of stuff. And so I just write it down and write it down. Um, and then in 2005, I got an idea to write a short story for my youngest sister, who is 9 years younger than me. She was turning 17. And I was on a plane flying to one of my younger brothers. He was getting married in a different state. And so I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write her a short story. And so with just regular notebook and pencil, I write there on the plane. I started writing it. And that is what gave birth to the novel that I just published.
Wow. When you were talking about, being so advanced, right? I like sort of already predicted everything else that you said afterwards because I can relate to it. Not only because I faced a similar experience, growing up, but being like a creative consultant myself, and I chat to so many, talented individuals like teens, they're facing the same criticism that you faced. And one of the first questions I wanted to ask you, which you already mentioned anyway, and that's just us now being in sync, is was there any criticism? And now you've just mentioned, that there was. And I'm sure it wasn't only criticism from your family. And I mean, the worst thing you could do as a creative is, give your first draft, or for me, for example, give my first music production or my first DJ mix to a family member. Hey, listen to this, because no doubt they're going to come back and say, this is rubbish. You're wasting your time. You know, do something more realistic with your life. Be a doctor or something. It,
Yeah.
it hit us all. It hit us all growing up as creators, no matter what we did. But we, just like yourself, I wouldn't say for myself, I had suicidal ideation or anything like that, but you end up feeling like you're worth nothing in this world. And I mean, being so advanced, I'm sure there were also peers that looked at you and was like, Terrance is weird, you know, because you're not normal. But being not normal is being special. You had these gifts, you had these talents. And you know, your story, the short version of it that you have just mentioned, can be such an inspiration. I mean, when I share this episode, I'm going to share that story, in a short, will be inspiration for so many teens out there that have these gifts, but nobody is telling them that, hey, look, you got gifts, you're special, you're not like everyone else. And somebody needs to tell them that. And unfortunately, it's not their parents that are telling them that, it's not their cousins or their close friends that are telling them that, but our parents is, going to tell them that, not in so many words, where they're going to be like, yo, I'm going through the same thing. I'm getting criticized and bullied all the time because of my gifts and talents, but I'm not getting told. As I said, it's gifts and talent. It's coming out like as I'm weird. Something is wrong with me, you know? And that's what we're trying to fix as well. What I'm trying to fix as well, when it comes to the work that I do, to say, hey, look, there's nothing wrong with you. If you're alone, it's cool. If you're having suicidal thoughts, it's cool. Suicidal ideation is cool, but let's work on it. There's nothing wrong with you. Tap into those gifts, just like what Terrance has done. So thank you for being so honest and transparent about your childhood. You know,
Yeah. Well,
it's a lot.
weird simply means not normal. But then again, what is normal? I mean, if we really stop and think about it, what is normal? By what measure? Because what's normal to you is not normal to me. For example, weather and experiences that way. What's normal to me is not normal to you, you know, but it's okay to be weird. Like I teach middle school, so I teach seventh graders. So these are 12, 13, 14-year olds, somewhere around there, unless they've been held back and then they're a bit older because they didn't apply themselves to their studies and they had to retake the grade. But they'll often say, Miss Niedziela, you're weird. And I look at them with this like Cheshire cat grin, like, you have no idea. And they kind of look at me like, what is true is like, really, actually, you have no idea how weird I really am. I
Yeah.
also tell people that, you guys are lucky. You get me in very short doses. Me, I've been stuck with myself 24/7 for almost 47 years. I don't get a vacation, and sometimes I wish I could. And I'm not joking about that. There are some times, if we're honest, to be like, you know what? Because, like, for me, I never liked the way I was. I always wanted to be better. I knew that there were things in me that were broken because of my background, because of the way I was raised. There were a lot of dysfunctional things that I was taught that were normal to me, but were not good. Like verbally tearing someone down as an expression of love. I thought that was real love. And it wasn't. It was a weird, messed up, you know, mess. Um, and so it wasn't until my early 20s when I moved away from my hometown and moved to a different place that I had some amazing older people in my life who were willing to pull me aside and say, "Hey, we're going to teach you some stuff." I had one lady that was in the church that I was going to who literally pulled me aside and said, "I'm going to teach you social skills." And she used the mother tone that, when mom says you're going to do something, you do it or else. Um, Not that she would, but she cared that much about me. She saw that there was that deficit in me, and so she taught me social skills. You know, um, I didn't have a dad. I had a father, a biological father, but as far as being a daddy, being that one that I could come to and I could lean on and depend on his strength and learn what it means to be a real man and all those kinds of stuff, I didn't have that. So I had men like one man named Bill as a perfect example. Uh, he spoke into my life when I annoyed the living tar out of him. Like the way I carried myself, the way I talked, everything. I was really annoying. I really was. I admit it. I was. Um, in fact, if I was to go back in time, I'd probably slap myself and be like, "Dude, what are you doing?" No joke. Where God has brought me from to where I am now is so night and day difference, and I still have a lot of work to do, but uh, it's really an awesome work. Uh, but he really felt that God wanted him to speak into my life, and so he did. He became a dad to me, and if it had not been for Bill, I would not be the man that I am. I would not. And there are other men and other women who were brought into my life to be mothers, to be fathers to me. And now that I am in a position as a teacher where I'm working with youth, I've done youth ministry in a church setting, and I've done a lot of different types of things. And I've had some students who told me, they verbalized, they see me as a dad. And that's really cool because I don't have children of my own. And so to be that father figure to those that need it, you're talking about that. So many kids who need that. Um, but for me, it was a relationship with Jesus Christ, not religion, but just making Jesus my Lord and Savior and striving to walk out the Bible to the best of my understanding and ability. And just praying, God change me. I even for a long time prayed, God change me no matter what it takes. And that's a desperate prayer, but I was desperate in that my younger years because I saw that there was stuff in me that was damaged, that there were things that should not be. And I was like, God, you're the only one who can change me. Please change me. And he took me through this process, and he's still taking me through that process. And there's still stuff that I struggle with that, I sometimes like, dude, why are you still struggling with this? Um, but I look back at where I was, like I said before, to where God is now, you know,
Yeah.
um, and I can now pass those lessons that I have learned and am learning onto those. And like with my writing, with everything, is just like if I can encourage and if I can build up, and be like, you know what, God is good. The mess that we've experienced in our life is not his fault. That is the result of people making really less than intelligent decisions. Both us personally bringing things onto ourselves, because if we're honest, we have not necessarily made the greatest decisions in our lives, but also the results of other people in their brokenness and in their messed upness, making destructive decisions. Um, but like, when you're talking about family, I learned some interesting things about my extended family, my great grandparents, my grandparents, and looking at my father and at my mother, and now realizing that they did the best they could with what they had. Like when I was younger, I didn't like hearing that. But when I realized how broken and messed up they were, and how it was infinitely worse in the previous generations, like they were actually a huge step forward in the positive compared to a great grandfather who would come home, beat his wife and family, and make them kiss his knuckles. Like, no joke. That is messed up, you know? And so there's all this stuff, and I see that with the students that I teach and what they are experiencing, stuff that no child should ever experience, you know. Um, and yet, like you said, coming alongside them, being like, hey, guess what? God made you. No matter how you came into the world, whether it was because of some evil person making a very bad choice, in the case of abuse or rape or things like that, God still breathed life into you, which means that you're a gift. The world needs you right now where you're at. Like, I used to think that I was a man out of time. Dude, I would rather have a horse and armor and a sword than drive a car, wear this shirt. Like, that's me. But it took me a long time to realize that, hey, the world right now needs a guy who's into chivalry and honor and striving to be loyal and that kind of stuff. But the world needs our talents. The world needs our giftings. What we do with them is what determines. Adolf Hitler was a master orator, and he could get people riled up and he could really get people together. Problem was, he used his talents for evil, you know. But then there are others, Nelson Mandela and others who, Winston Churchill and lots of other people, even the Lord Jesus, who had talents that used them for good and brought life, brought freedom, brought hope, brought all of these different types of things, and that's what I try and get my students to understand is you got a talent, that's great, but what you gonna do with it, you know?
Yeah. Wow. I'm blown away. Can I just end the recording now and post this? Show concluded. Wow. 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 There is so much to unpack there with what you have just said. I'm like listening to you and I'm like, okay, I'm not the only crazy one here, you know, in the world. There's other people that like feel the same way as I do right now. And what you're saying about God and Jesus, like 100%, is like, you know, I used to be in situations in my life and I should always play victim. When something happens, I'm like, why is this happening to me? Like, what have I done wrong? And then I go and then I pray, just like you, to God, to Jesus. Why? And then later on in life, I'm like, okay, if Jesus never take me through that, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing now. And just as you said, it's a process. So I can easily, just like millions of people around the world, go and I can kneel down and I can pray and I can say, Jesus, guide me. This is where I want to be. This is where I need to be in life. And he's like, yeah, okay, Kino. I feel you, brother, you know, but it's not going to happen overnight.
Mhm.
I first need to get you to experience this, go through this hardship, go through this challenge, and then you're going to get that. I never understood that. I never understood that until it was like, okay, hit me one day. Okay, now I understand why God actually put me through that. Because if I never learned from that experience or that hardship, which today in 2026, I don't see it as hardships anymore. I don't see it as challenges anymore. I see it as lessons. It's blessings in disguises, you know? And that's what I have to go through to get to the next level in life. Because as you said, we needed. I always say that every single creator out there in the world can be any form of creative, an author, musician, an artist, a poet, there's a deeper meaning behind your life. And you need to identify what that is. So if your skill is, okay, writing a book, every book has a deeper message in it. You know, can be fiction or nonfiction, but there's a deeper message in it, for the reader to take away that's going to impact their life. If you're a musician, yeah, when you put that track out there, there's a deeper message in that track that you want your listeners to take away with, that's going to motivate them in some way or form, that's going to help them in some way or form. And that's how you build your brand. It's not just about, the product that you're putting out there to the world, that message. And you have a responsibility. So identify what that is and focus on that, And as you grow, in this enlightened manner, in this enlightened way, you're going to grow other people as well. And there's so much beauty in that. We're all vessels of God. We're all vessels of Jesus. We're just going about it differently because he's made us all different, to fulfill the word or the message or to help other people, whatever it may be. And that's just what I've evaluated for myself personally. So yeah, thanks. Thanks for sharing that story. Really, thanks for sharing that story. So I'm going to tackle the elephant in this conversation right now. You have just launched your first novel, okay, under Just in Love Press. How is Catherine doing, by the way? Her and I are very familiar with each other.
Oh, yeah, she's very good. Very busy. Very busy.
Yeah. That's for sure. She's extremely busy, but she is doing phenomenal work. So big ups to her. That's why I have to mention, whenever one of our authors comes onto the show, I have to bring up her name because she is doing great work. Not only for our authors, but for a global community. So the elephant in the room is, why have you only launched or released a novel now?
Truthfully, because I was slack and lazy and did not get it done way sooner than I should have. That is being completely blunt and honest.
But then it wasn't God's timing as well.
Honestly, no. I think that was me not fulfilling his plan. Because in prayer time and things, there was kind of a plan that was put out in front of me. This is what I want you to do. These are the times I want you to write. These is when I want you to do this, when you do that. And I decided, nope, I am going to go run over here and do this distraction and do my own thing over here and do my own thing over there. And so, yeah, that is actually, now I do know that God can take this and use it for his glory and take my mess up and, but yeah, so that is actually why, but I should have had a lot more published by now.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, I know. I understand. I understand, why you would say that. But the reason I mentioned God's timing is because, he has a time for everything that's supposed to happen in our life. Another lesson that I learned by myself that I didn't understand, before, but I fully understand now is that, you may want to, release this book now. I've written this book. I want to release it now and just get it out there, but it doesn't happen. But once again, it's happening for you, not to you, because there's a bigger plan at play here that we really understand in the present moment. So you probably had a lot more to do, before the book could actually get out. So I guess, asking you the question was like already knowing the answer as well, But because you were so brutally honest and, I was lazy and I just never want to go into it and so on. But I guess, there was a reason behind it as well, What if you released the book 10 years ago? You possibly wouldn't have met Catherine,
That is true. Yes, that is
You know what I mean? So, yeah. So, you take that as a blessing in disguise. You probably wouldn't have went to my ear acting now. Yeah, exactly. You would have met each other, So, everything has its timing, and we just have to have trust and faith that what we want to happen, hope to happen, will happen in God's time. So let's talk about the book. You can mention the title of the book, and then you can give us a brief summary about what this book is about. There is two things I want to mention before you get started that, hit me when I was reading, about you today, and I got it written down here. Sometimes God leads us through fire before revealing the lightning within. That was like, wow to me, you know, so true. So true. Um, Scar's whole purpose. Those were two things that just caught my attention today, when I was reading about you. And that's a deeper message, I was talking about in an author's work. But anyway, let's stop listening to boring Kino here. Tell us about the book.
All right, so the book is called Tales of Aris Becoming Fire and Lightning, and is the first book of a fantasy trilogy, where Dr. Michael Jenkins, he's actually in our world, he's 27. Him and his 17-year-old sister Cassandra are taken from Minneapolis, Minnesota, to this other world, Aris, and they find out that they've been brought there by this being called Amai, the Lord of Light and Life. And he places before them both a choice. He's like, I have called you to a specific mission, but you must choose whether or not you're going to accept it. He says, and if you don't accept it, okay, I'll just take you back to where I brought you from, and you'll have no memory of this whatsoever. And so they both kind of have an internal struggle, and they decide, okay, I'm going to go ahead and accept it. And so what they find out is that 2,000 years before they arrive in this world, there's a prophecy. And part of that prophecy is that in Aris's darkest hour, Amai will send fire and lightning. And these two beings, this fire and lightning, are going to unify the country because the 7 races of Aris are all divided. Because of war, because of racism, because each race is actually different. Like there is a cat race, the Vidar. There are these kind of fish aqua people called the Gwenferai. There's dragons. There's the Dross, which are kind of like reptile-esque type creatures. And there are different types, and like one has a Triceratops head, one has a Velociraptor head, one has a dragon head, one has I think a chameleon head. Different types. You have the Iktaka, which are an underworld race, with 4 arms, 4 legs, kind of L-shaped ant-esque type body and stuff, but not insectoid. You have the Hikaru, which are winged people, and you have the Tala, which are kind of look like regular people, but they have 6 fingers and 6 toes, and a little bit different. They're the shorter of all the races. And so each one of these races, they're all bitter at each other because of various things, racism and messed up decisions and all that kind of thing. And so Cassandra is chosen to be the speaker of reconciliation. It's her job to unify all the races because this evil dragon called Batrel has sent his legion into Aris in a blitzkrieg. So this lightning war, he opened up tons of portals in the country and just started pouring his troops in. And these two are now kind of thrown in the midst of this. Michael is chosen to be an Elesh, which is a flaming knight. So his armor, his wings, his sword, they're all made out of blue and white fire. And I'm a Star Wars nerd. So I liken them. The Elesh are sort of like my Jedi, but they rescue the daughter of one of the racial lords from getting sacrificed. They meet their villain. So Michael is being hunted by an evil white tiger, who has half of his face has been kind of burned away because of Amai's water burns like acid anyone who is corrupted by Bahrel's evil. And then, but he's like 8, 9 feet tall, incredibly intelligent, psychopath. He used to be Elesh. Um, and then Cassandra is being hunted by Lusare, who was a Dross, who was one of Amai's sages, basically like a prophetess and a priestess, who lost her family in a genocidal war that happened a few thousand years before Michael and Cassandra show up. And so instead of seeing it like we were talking about, this is evil people's decisions. She just blames Amai. She makes tons of bad decisions, allows Barrel to corrupt her, and now she's a psycho. And so these two are literally hunting Michael and Cassandra to destroy and eat them. Like that's how they keep themselves alive, is eating the servants of Amai. But anyway, in the process of all their adventures and everything, Amai brings teachers. So Captain Ragnar is also a white tiger. He is actually Vold's great-grandson, who has his own redemption story. He started going to evil, but he went back before he went too far, like Vold did. And he is Michael's mentor. And then Lady Akima, who is the daughter of the Western Dragon Lords, she is a silver and purple dragon who breathes ice. She's the only one in that world who can breathe ice. And she teaches Cassandra. And so one of the main undercurrent themes is we must all walk out God's plan for our life the way he tells us to, not the way other people are expecting, because everyone around us has their expectations. We have our expectations, but God's expectations and what he's called us to don't always match up, and our own choices get in there and they mess things up too. And so, I have complex races. Each culture has different traditions. The names are different. I actually put a pronunciation guide and glossary in the back of the book because people who are not familiar with fantasy are going to be like, okay, hard name said to hard name, blah, blah, blah. And hard name said this, and they have no clue who Amai is and Ragnar and Akima and Titan and all of these other different, Sitali and, crazy names. But yeah, so what started out as a short story grew into this gigantic world with 80,000 years of history. I wrote out the timeline, all sorts of cool, funky stuff because I'm a nerd that way. And one author friend of mine, established author, he's like, you have enough material here to write for the rest of your life and never, ever exhaust it. And so I love it. So that's what I do,
Yeah, yeah. Even though this is a fantasy, label a fantasy, there's still so much like truth, behind it, non-fiction, Was that your intention to like sort of, take something that's happening in reality or happens in reality and then turn it into this fantasy story?
In some ways, yes. Well, one of the first things I do before I write and brainstorm, I strive to pray. Is that Holy Spirit, please write through me. Whatever I write, I want us to glorify God. And if it doesn't, it's a waste of your time reading it and a waste of my time writing. That's the way I view it. Okay. That's, so everything I write is written from a Christian point of view. But there were certain things that I intentionally set out to include in this world, in this series, like Amai. Amai is actually a variant of ego eimi, which is Greek for I am, which is the word that Jesus used whenever he talked to himself about being God, or talked about himself being God. When the guards came to arrest him in the Garden of Gethsemane, and they said, "We're looking for Jesus of Nazareth." He says, "I am." Ego eimi. It's I am. In fact, in the Greek translation of the Old Testament in Exodus, when Yahweh, or God, appears before um, Moses. And Moses said, "Who do I tell the people has sent me?" And he said, "I am that I am," which is translated as, capital Lord in English, or Adonai, or capital YHWH, Yahweh. But it's in the Greek, it's ego eimi. And so amai is Greek for I am. So it's a variant of that. I wanted that. Aras means beloved or betrothed, if I remember correctly. And so Aras is the betrothed, it's the beloved of amai. Um, there are other things that were in there that I wrote it. I looked back and read what I just got finished writing, and I was like, "Oh wow, that was good. That's good." And that did not come from me. Like, that was just the Holy Spirit writing through me, because it just the thoughts are flowing, and when I really get into the creative mode, like I'm just typing so fast and everything, and then I'll go back and I'll read and I'm like, "Holy cow, that is good." Like, no, like that is seriously hardcore good. And that did not come from me. That is definitely God. Um, and so it's kind of a mixture of both. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. I feel you. I feel you, brother. I feel you. So even though the book has a lot of Christian values and principles in it, I still see it as someone out there in the world who's not a Christian, you know, I'm going to say like maybe a Muslim or Hindu, for example, can still pick up your book and still take away a lot of, lessons from it,
oh yeah, most definitely.
you know, like any, sort of human, this comes down to like, one message to like take away from it that can impact, their life. Just like what you said about, you may have one intention, you know, but God has a different intention. It sort of like just applies to every single human out there,
Mhm. Right.
you know, for me, my
Mhm.
thoughts, based on what you just said. So, Becoming Fire and Lightning, is this book one of a series?
Yes. So there's a trilogy called the Fire and Lightning series, and that follows Michael and Cassandra's adventures in Aras. Um, and then, but Tales of Aras is like the overarching name of every book in that world. Just like, the Star Wars, Star Wars has tons and tons of books and series and trilogies and everything else like that, but it's under the Star Wars banner. The same is true for this. So like between each of the books in the Tales of Aras become Fire and Lightning series, I'm gonna have a standalone that is going to tell the backstory of one of the characters, secondary characters in the trilogy. So the one I'm working on right now that we're hoping to release next year, February, is all about Miklos, who is a hero that Michael hears tons and tons about, that had his own journey, who also was a scholar like Michael, and then got called into being an Elesh, and all of his plans got thrown out the window for something way greater than he ever imagined. Um, and then after the second book in the trilogy, Captain Ragnar's story of redemption, you know, because there's always going to be an undercurrent in each of the books about redemption, about hope, life, salvation, you know, different things like that, not judging by what we see or by what we hear, but really by what does God say about it.
Yeah. It's a great strategy, for any fantasy up and coming independent author out there in the world listening. It's a great strategy to, you know, like for you the trilogy, and then okay, take out a character and then do a whole book, you know, about them. I mean, we see it happening, on television as well. Take Marvel, sorry, for example, and I'm a huge Marvel fan. You have the Avengers, and then, we'll have a story about Tony Stark and then the Hulk. It's a
Yep.
great strategy in fantasy, and it makes it so exciting. It does. It honestly does, as a listener or as a reader. It's cool. So you got this timeline. You got the first book that's out there, right? It's released now. You want the individual standalone book out next year, Feb. So in 2026 is the other books now that are part of the series coming out.
What do you mean?
I'm just trying to connect the dots on your timelines for your releases.
Okay, I see.
Coming Fire and Lightning, that's
Yep.
released.
Yes. And so the
And
next so next year, February, is when the Saga of Miklos, the standalone book, comes out.
right.
And then after that will be book 2 of the Fire and Lightning series.
Right.
And so it's kind of like I'm trying to release one like every year or so, give or take. You know, because Becoming Fire and Lightning took 20 years to write. I'm not going to take 20 years to write the rest of them. In fact, I had one older lady who read the book and loved it, and she's like, "Keep in mind that you have readers who are older, and we can't wait this long for you to get your books out. We want the rest of the books." So I'm like, "Okay, yeah, I'll get those out."
Right. Okay, so now we're on the same page. So in case any listeners got confused, we got the first book that's been released, the standalone, linked to the first book will be released in February, and then book 2 of the series will be released after that. Perfect.
Right.
So what I was thinking in my mind, hence why I was trying to connect the books, I'm thinking, so is Terrance going to release like 2 more books in 2026 in a short period of time, and then February release the standalone? Like, how fast is this guy writing? That's what was going down. Okay, cool. So we got first book that's out. So when was the first book released?
Last month, actually, May
Was released
19th
last month.
was when, yeah.
Okay, so it's still in its honeymoon phases.
Pretty
And
much.
how's it been going with the book?
As far as I know, okay. I haven't had anyone say it was horrible yet. You're always going to have someone who's going to be like, "This is the worst piece of trash I have ever read in my life. Burn it."
We're always going to have critics. Anyone.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
But no, it's going well. It's going pretty well.
Yeah. One thing graphically that also stood out to me was your cover art. I was blown away by it. Well done. So do you design your own cover arts or do you outsource it?
Actually, that was collaboration between Catherine and myself.
Nice.
I sent some ideas to her written out, and of course she's an artist. So she put together an image, and then we worked together to hone that and to polish it and everything and enhance what she had originally said, originally came up with, and voila, there you go. So she's already telling me, what do you want for the cover for the next one, so we can start working on that and getting that ready. So I have a few ideas.
Yeah. As we said, she's just always busy and she is just so talented and great at all that she does.
Yeah, she is my writer mom. Like I call her my writer mom, because she's like this, in the United States, the soccer mom, the mother that at all of her child's games is like, "Oh yeah, go," just the crazy excited and super supportive, and that's the way she is. Every time I win an award or I accomplish some small thing, she acts as though it's this greatest thing since, microwave popcorn or landing on the moon or whatever, which is cool. I need that support. So, and so she calls me son. I call her mom. She's awesome.
Yeah, it's human nature, that we really focus on the small wins in life. It's like, I understand, we want to become best-selling authors. And I mean, the last time Catherine and I spoke, she says she wants to see her authors becoming New York Times best-selling authors. That's the vision that she has for authors. And I got no doubt that she is going to accomplish that goal.
Yeah.
She's driven, she's ambitious, she has faith, she believes, she has desire. So that will happen for authors. But along the way, like I feel it and I feel her when she's celebrating those small wins with the authors because those are the stepping stones,
Mhm.
you know. So take the small wins, appreciate it, and yeah, you have landed on the moon. Even if it was a small trophy that you won, you have landed on the moon,
Yep.
you know? Yeah, take it. By the way, who met who first or who found who first?
As far as Catherine and I,
Yeah,
you mean?
Catherine
Okay.
and I.
So, we're both a part of the same organization, Word Weavers International, which is writers supporting each other through critique groups and things like that. And so I had signed up. I was in a face-to-face group, but that one ended up folding for various reasons. And so I heard that there were online groups. And so I'm like, hey, that's great. So Catherine is the president of the online group that I joined. We were actually talking about this recently. I think I've been a part of it now for like 6 years. Uh, and so in all of that time, we've rotated out lots and lots of members, but I'm one of the few that have been there with her for like the 6 years. And so, I'm a chaplain of the group, and I help out and do different things and stuff like that. But yeah, so it was kind of one of those where again, the Lord brought people together, and there you go.
Yeah, 100%. Going back to what I said, if you released the book 10 years ago, all of this would not have happened.
Yeah.
Would not have happened. Okay, cool. Well done to you. Well done to you. You know, at least you got it out there. You know, people probably going like 30, 40 years and they still haven't gotten their work out there. So, what would you say to those authors out there now who are listening to the show who are scared, driven by fear, scared of criticism, that don't want to release their book and probably in the same, I quote, lazy position that you were in once upon a time? What would you tell them right now?
I would probably say I'd give them the same advice that Catherine told me actually, and that is keep working at it. It was given to you for a reason. And so it doesn't matter what has happened before this moment. It's important to keep working, keep growing. Um, if you're able to go to writing conferences, go to those. You know, there's one that I've gone to for the past few years that has been great. In fact, Catherine and other awesome authors actually teach classes, and I've taken tons of those, including sword fighting classes, which is what I used in order to do my fight scenes in my book. Um, and so I was able to partner with Amy Bright, who studies historical European martial arts, and so she taught me about the sword, and we'd go through fight scenes and be like, nope, that's not going to work. And you'd lose an arm there, or, this works and that doesn't work and everything. But I would say learn as much as you can. Don't be afraid of criticism because you can't grow unless you're getting criticism. All right. Yes, the delivery may have been horrible. The, like the family member that gave me the really harsh criticism. But if I go beyond the harshness, there was something that they said that actually did ring true, and it was a good piece of advice. They just didn't exactly deliver it in a healthy way. Uh, but be willing to, I would say, if you haven't finished your first draft, finish it. Stop going back and redoing it over and over and over again, which is what I did, which is one of the reasons why it took me so long. Um, get the whole first draft out first. Okay. Verbal vomit onto the page. Just blah, get it all out there. Once it's out there, then you can go step by step to do your revisions. Okay. Your big changes, changing scenes, changing uh, all of those types of things, rearranging chapters, cutting down chapters, cutting out chapters, adding them, whatever it is. Um, and that's true even with poetry or songwriting or a memoir or anything. Get it all out there first. You got to get it out there. You have to have something to work with. Once you do that, because when you work on your first draft, getting it all out there, that's in a safe place because it's just you writing. Get your butt in the seat, write it out. Once you've done that, then you can read books about writing. There's some awesome, awesome resources out there that you can use. Now, there's also a lot of really bad resources too, but there's a lot of really good resources out there. And if you're like myself, who's into like fantasy and different things like that, there's definitely great resources. But read. Find good literature. All right, there's lots of stuff out there. Not all of it is good. But read stuff that's in your genre. Read stuff that's outside of your genre. And then get yourself a group of people that are also creatives, that are writers or songwriters or musicians or whatever. Because you need to have your peeps. You got to have your people. But make sure that a lot of them are older than you, more experienced. Okay? Don't throw out experience. Experience means a lot. Even those that may be younger than you, especially older writers, there are some out there that are younger than you, but have more experience and a lot of wisdom that you can learn from. Okay. The majority of the people in my critique group are like grandpas and grandmas. And so, but like my English background, as a teacher, education, lots of other different things, I'm able to bring that not in an arrogant way, but I'm using my gifts to support them. They're using their gifts to support me. And so really important. You got to have the support group. There's no lone wolfing it. We're not by ourselves in the world. That's one of the worst things you could ever do. But walk through that process and don't be afraid. Don't be afraid because it will come, and celebrate those victories. There's a lot of stuff ahead of you and it's awesome. You just got to lean into the process. And there are some times when something is given to us, it is strictly for us, whether to help us heal from something, help us to process emotions, different things like that. And so that's where getting counsel, feeling it out, really comes into play as well. Okay, was this written just for me or was this written for me to share? And sometimes you'll write something for yourself and another person will read it and go, wow, I really needed that. I had that happen a lot too. And so like, oh, maybe this was meant for someone just more than myself. So I hope that helps.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing so much dope, inspirational words. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So, Terrance, where can people find you online?
Well, they can find my website, TerranceNiedielaJr.com. Also on Facebook, Terrance Niedziela Jr. And I have a author's page, Tales of Aras, Aras. You can find that there. I'm also on Instagram, Terrance Niedziela Jr. And then the books you can find them on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, major booksellers and things like that. You can find that and all the other stuff that I'm a part of.
Perfect. Cool. I will definitely share the link to your website because, with authors, their websites always have the links to everywhere else. All the information is always provided on there. Well, Terrance, thank you so much once again for coming on the show and sharing, your life story with no filter, chatting about your book and giving us a lot of inspiration as we conclude the show. I really appreciate
Thank
it,
you.
man. Well, check.